Hello everyone, welcome. This is the first lecture in your course Git and GitHub by Adionics. My name is Ahmed and I will be your host in this course. In this first lecture we are going to have a quick introduction into version control systems in general, and then we're gonna dive right into Git. So the first question that might pop up in your mind is, why use version control systems at all? Why use Git, or why use any VCS, which is short for version control system, at all? Well, without a version control system, your life as a developer would be much harder. The following are just some of the advantages of using a VCS. Now, imagine that you are not using a VCS and you have a project, and you have a number of people typically working with you on that same project. Now, you will experience one or all of the following. Enabling multiple developers to work on the same set of files at the same time will be hard. Imagine how you could do that just on a shared folder. Now, imagine that we have a web server, for example, and multiple people are working on some web application that is stored on that web server, and it happens that multiple people happen to be working on the same HTML file or PHP file, whatever the format you are using, and all of them want to do some changes to that same file at the same time. Now, how can that possibly happen? The only solution for such a thing, without, of course, using a version control system, would be that each one of them will have a copy at his or her own desktop computer and makes the changes that is required, and then he or she should bring that file back to the system. But now you'll have another problem. You'll have several versions of the same file. Each one resides on a different desktop or a laptop computer. Each developer has his or her own version of the file, and then they want to merge that file back to the system, to the web server, with the changes done by each one of them. How can you merge those changes together, and how you can ensure that no changes of one developer overwrites the changes of the other one? It's really a hard time. That's one thing. Proper management of the changes made in the project is another difficulty. Now, what if you want to undo the latest changes done to your project? What if you don't know exactly which version of the project was working, or even worse, can you tell the difference between the current version of the project and the previous one or the one before it? Now, imagine that we are in the same example, but even if you are working on the project all by yourself, you're not working in a team, you don't suffer the collaboration problem that we have tackled in the previous point. However, you are working on a project and all of a sudden you find that the project stopped working. You did a change after another, after another, after another, and suddenly you find that the web application has failed to start up, or at least the function that you have been working on has stopped working. Maybe a button is not clicking anymore, or an image that should appear doesn't appear, or anything of that all web developers see in their daily lives. Now, how you can ensure that the last working version of the project is the one that you should revert to? You have made several changes to the file, and now you want to know exactly which change has made the application stop working, which change had the error, so that you can undo that change and return back to the most stable version of the application. Now, one possible solution of such a problem without using a VCS system is that you can take a copy of the files that you are working of, and this is a very common scenario. We use it even not in the developer's world, even in sysadmins, when you are writing a script, for example, or changing a configuration file. A very common scenario is to take a backup of the file before making changes to it. Copying a file, for example, to the same file .back or .orig or .org is not uncommon at all. However, again, what if you want to make several changes of the file? Are you going to make several backups of the file, like, for example, file.back1, file.back2, file.back3, and so on? This is becoming more and more difficult. And even worse, how you can know the changes that happen between file.back1 and file.back2, for example. How can you exactly know which changes have been made so that you can revert to file.back1, for example, and not file.back3? A third one is, if you made a mistake when using a rich text editor or an integrated development environment, or in short IDE, like for example the Microsoft Visual Studio, you can simply press Ctrl-Z or click the undo button to undo the last change that have been done. If you made a mistake, if you write something wrong, if you write some code that produced an error, you can simply just click on the undo button or press Ctrl-Z several times so that the code can return back to the way it was working. However, what if you saved that file and closed the IDE and went to lunch, or even if several days passed and you made more and more and more changes to the files? How can you undo all those changes even after you have closed the computer or even after you have left the office, how you can undo those changes back. This is another difficulty that developers, and not just developers, any person that's working with files or with text or with anything that changes on a computer suffers this problem. Well, a version control system, or in short a VCS, solves all of those difficulties, and it also has a lot of more advantages, as we're going to see later in this course. Considering the above advantages, taking smart backups of your project is a bonus. Now, how many times have you had to take a backup of your application for some reason, just a golden copy that will stay in your hard disk or in some safe place in your safe, so that when something wrong happens to an application that is being currently developed, you can quickly revert to that golden copy that was working, that golden copy that had everything up and running, that had everything just fine. You can revert back to it, which is referred to, as I just mentioned, as a golden backup or a golden copy. Now, taking several golden copies of your application, taking backups of your application, is just a breeze when you are using a version control system, as we're going to see later in this course. So, since we are going to study Git in this course, it's worth noting some of the history of Git. Don't worry, this is not going to be long or boring. It's just less than a minute of some interesting information about the origins of Git I thought you might be curious to know. Git was founded in 2005 by Linus Torvalds, who is also the creator of Linux. Linus needed an open source, solid, and robust version control system to be used in Linux kernel development. So he devised the Git version control system, and he used it in his kernel development project. And it's also worth noting that version 2.6.12 of the Linux kernel was created using Git. And Git in itself is not an acronym for anything, so you won't find that Git, for example, the G stands for general, or the I stands for integrated, or T stands for whatever. It is not an acronym for something. It is not a symbol of something. It's just a word. It's an English word. Actually, it's British, and in British slang, Git means unpleasant person. This name was chosen by Linus himself as the name of the project. And finally, it's worth noting that Git is not GitHub. They are two different, however, very, very related products. Git is the name of the version control system that we are studying in this course, while GitHub is a web application that serves as a Git repository. It uses all of the Git features, and it also adds its own unique ones. GitHub is not the only Git repository available. There are many other paid and free alternatives to pick from. However, in this course, we have chosen to study GitHub, as it is one of the most popular Git repositories out there. Now, in the next lecture, we are going to start getting our hands dirty. We are going to start installing Git on our systems, so stay tuned.